Thanks for downloading a 3CR podcast. 3CR is an independent community radio station based in Melbourne, Australia. We need your financial support to keep going. Go to www.3cr.org.au for more information and to donate online. Now stay tuned for your 3CR podcast.
Hello and welcome to Lost in Science Summer Series. My name is Claire and, well, I hope you've had a great summer. We certainly have been. And as the name suggests, this is a very special time for Lost in Science where we take you back into the archives. We reach into the archives to bring back some of our favourite stories from last year and beyond. And this week on the show, our first story comes to us from February last year. It comes from Chris speaking about something that is close to my heart, probably a lot of your hearts as well as our year gets underway. Chris brings us a story about how time can fly without wings. You know, the old adage, oh, how time flies, oh, the years are just getting shorter and shorter. And whether there is specifically any scientific basis for feeling like time is passing quicker with each year. Is it just a psychological thing? Is it our brains playing mind games? Or is there something else at play in the universe here? Chris has the answers. You will have to listen to receive those answers. And the other summer series story we're going to be bringing you this week is a chat that I did with CSIRO researcher Dr. Leo Joseph. And Leo leads a team from CSIRO who have completed the DNA sequencing and understanding of the genome of the night parrot. For those of you who might not know what night parrots are, they are probably the most elusive bird in Australia. They are nocturnal birds. They were thought to be extinct for much of the 20th century. And, you know, they were only found in very small numbers, popping up sort of in the last 20 and 30 years, with a little bit of controversy sort of thrown in there as well. This is a really fascinating story from Leo, but as an update on the side, from September last year, a research team consisting of Indigenous rangers and scientists actually made a breakthrough discovery with in regards to the night parrot. So they detected the largest known night parrot population in the world. So these birds have only ever been found sort of like one or two or just heard. Certainly we've never seen anything like as many as they're claiming, which is around 50 night parrots living in Western Australia's Great Sandy Desert on land managed by the Ngurpa people. So some really incredible research that's come out last year, and I feel like I'm probably going to have to do a follow-up story in 2025 on this. But in the meantime, sit back, relax, get yourself ready for the summer series, and on with the show.
You are listening to Lost in Science, and I am talking about time and why it appears to be speeding up. Look, it is really about our perception of time, I guess, is the thing that we're getting at here, which is one thing to me makes it a bit confusing. But Claire, you said, what do the physicists have to say? So let's check in with the physicists first of all on this particular conundrum.
I mean, it was a little bit tongue in cheek because I knew that you would check on what the physicists had to say. I always check on them. You always check with the physicists.
I don't need to; they'll just tell me anyway.
Yeah.
Look, okay. So the first question is, according to physics, basic question: is time speeding up? Yes.
Wow.
Cosmologically speaking, it is.
That's a hard yes.
It is a hard yes. So the thing is that when the universe was very young, time moved slower. So it's a little tricky. General relativity is Einstein's theory of general relativity, which describes gravity in the universe on large scales. It's kind of tricky, but put it simply, it's all about how gravity distorts space and time time slows down when there's a strong gravitational field. So it's, for instance, slower here on Earth than it is in space. Your feet, standing up, are slower in time than your brain. So, if you have strong enough gravitational field like a black hole, time actually stops. So yeah, gravity slows down time. So what you can think of it is that in the early universe, when the universe was very young, it was a lot smaller, things were closer together, gravity was stronger, and so time was slower. And so, yeah, time moved slower in the early universe. And in fact, this has recently been measured. They've looked at distant quasars, which are these very luminous objects from the early universe, and seen indications that time was indeed slower in the early universe. So tick, yes, time is speeding up cosmologically. Probably doesn't explain why it feels like it's February has gone so quickly.
Right. Are you telling me that it's not speeding up to the extent that we would be able to perceive it?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's what I'm trying to say.
Okay.
In other kind of, I guess, physical things, close to the other things, Caccione speculated that perhaps the length of the day could be speeding up, the Earth's rotation perhaps. Now, this is a bit complicated. Overall, on the large scale, the length of the day is actually getting slower due to tidal forces from the moon. We can look back at prehistory. We can look at stromatolites, fossils that show that about 600 million years ago, the day was only 21 hours in length. So a day is getting longer, is slowing down. However, in recent years, for some reason, the Earth has actually sped up. No one really knows why. It could be to do with climate change, even because of the shifting kind of water and ice around the Earth. It looks actually might even reverse again. Kind of it fluctuates anyway. But yes, the day has recently gotten shorter. So we can't actually... It could be the explanation as well. The days are getting shorter. I don't know if that's sufficient for you. Again, it's only a small bit. But really, I think the answer we're looking for is about psychology, because really time, how we experience it, is all about our perception of time. And, we measure time by events in our lives, by clocks even, maybe by the length of a day, but if it's only like a millisecond or a microsecond, you're not going to notice that so much. And this has been observed for a very long time. One of the, I guess, the big theories is it's kind of put in the 1890s, I guess. There was a book by a philosopher psychologist, William James, who wrote that as we get older, the same space of time seems shorter. This is kind of the idea that, like, you have a young child. For a young child, a year is a very large proportion of their life.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah. But as you get older, it becomes less of a amount of your life.
Right, of course. I mean, for my daughter, a year will be half of her life compared to 1/40th. It's like, that's, 1/40th for me. Spoiler alert. I'm turning 40 this year.
I'm glad that we were able to remind you of your own. Oh,
gosh. Where is the time gone, Chris?
Exactly. This is what I'm saying. So, yeah, I think on the length of a life, generally, we're all going to experience time speeding up as we get older, just from that simple kind of perspective sort of thing. But it is actually, I feel like it is more complicated than that. So people have also looked at the notion of how we, I guess, experience time based on what's happening in our lives. And so there's this thing that's been dubbed the holiday paradox. So basically the idea is, if you think about, you have a lot of new events happening. While they're happening, a rapid series of events, things can, in the moment, can seem to be going very quickly.
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
But then when you look back at them retrospectively, then it seems things seem to have taken actually longer. Well, most of our lives we look back on. When you look back on it, it seems to have taken longer than it actually was, because so much happened in that time. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of, the more things happen in a short period of time, the longer, when we look back on it, it will seem to us. And so this is why I think, we at times comment, yes, time is going so quickly. It's because sometimes there's not necessarily a lot of things happening. Like January is famous for, like, in our lives, things slow down. And in general, even though we live in a world that seems to have, so much going on, I had looked back and say that the news headlines from the 1st of January. Yeah. And it was the same things, the same wars and international events that we are concerned with now were happening back then. So in some ways, even though there is a lot happening, people's lives are being affected, things haven't changed a lot. It was still the same circumstance. So the actual events haven't happened a lot. So yeah, I think that, to me, that is the best explanation for why time seems to be going very fast at the moment, is because perhaps we are at the thing where we're not getting these new groundbreaking events. It might be worth thinking about, back in, say, 2020, when time seemed to drag for a lot of people. And sometimes it's because there was a lot of stuff happening very too quickly, it seemed. And, there were, like, pandemics, there were ships getting stuck in the Suez Canal, there were, like, all kinds of weird things going on. So, yeah, I don't know. I want to put that out there. This is what I think is the best explanation for what's going on. There's some other ideas about the way we process sensory information. To me, that seems a bit shaky ground. Perhaps there will be more in that in the future. But yeah, I think it is about how we remember time according to events. But yeah, remember, in the big picture, time is going to speed up because you are getting older. We're all getting older. And I think you just have to, go with the flow.
Congratulations on your discovery, which may well prove to be among the most significant in the history of science.
I cannot accept half-baked theories that sell newspapers. I'm a scientist.
Who are you, who are so wise in the ways of science?
A most distinguished scientist, whose name we know, even in the wild of Transylvania.
Across Australia on the Community Radio Network, you are listening to Lost in Science.
The night parrot is one of the most elusive birds in the world, thought extinct for much of the 20th century, and only fairly recently have a few individuals been found to be alive and well in the wild. Now, new research has just been published that has sequenced the genome of Australia's only nocturnal parrot, the night parrot. And to tell us about this huge step in conservation, we have with us this week Leo Joseph, who is director of the Australian National Wildlife Collection at the CSIRO in Canberra. Leo, welcome to Lost in Science.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Now, why is it such a big deal that you and your team have studied the night parrot's genes and published this genome? What does it tell us about this rare bird?
Well, I wonder, can I backstep a little bit to tell a bit more about the night parrot? Yeah, so the night parrot was discovered for, Western European sort of science in the middle of the 19th century, and it kind of disappeared around about 1880, 1890. And so during the 20th century, yes, there were people who would say they thought it was extinct, but happily I'm not one of them. There were reports of night parrots, but the bar was very high for acceptance of a record of a night parrot. If you say you went out and you saw a cockatoo that was pink below and grey on top, and you thought it was a galah, you wouldn't get questioned. But if you said you saw a night parrot, well, the bar was high. Why wasn't it some other parrot? Why wasn't it this? Why wasn't it that? Was it in a tree? Was it? And so because of the rarity that commenced around the end of the 19th century, the bar was very high. Now, an analysis that's been done recently, all the reports of night parrots during the 20th century, has weeded out the bad ones and the probable ones and the good ones. So we know that they were reported reasonably reliably during the 20th century, but that's not to say there was not an aura of mystery and intrigue about this bizarre animal, which there certainly was. So for much of the 20th century, there was no decent information about them, and they were mysterious. And just the name, night parrot, it conjures up a little humour. It also conjures up, a pretty unusual sounding parrot being active at night. Now, in 1990, a dead one was found, roadkilled in southwest Queensland. And in 2006, another one was found in southwest Queensland, dead under a fence. So this meant that, that helped focus a search. And John Young located them and announced it in 2013. And since then, research has been done by Steve Murphy, Nick Leesberg, and we know a lot about the biology of night parrots in southwest Queensland. And importantly, we know what they sound like and the kind of habitat they like. And that has led to rediscovering them in Western Australia.
Right.
They were known from Western Australia. So here we are. We've got a parrot that is in its own right pretty weird, nocturnal, living out in the desert. Bit of a ghost, but it's come back. It's alive and reasonably well. We know it's very closely related to some very similar looking parrots, the ground parrots, eastern and western ground parrots. We've had little bits of DNA that we've been able to examine relationships of those parrots to other parrots with. But now with a genome, it's like you have the full genetic blueprint, is the term we often hear around the place, or a road. I like to use a roadmap analogy. So by sequencing the genome, it's a bit like we've put all the roads of Australia on a map, but not the place names. We've had to have the genome annotated at GenBank, where one lodges one's genetic results. And that is the equivalent of putting the place names on the roads. It's like genes, so they've told us which genes are there and everything. So now we are in a position to get to answering your question, I guess. We're in a position to say, well, okay, what can we learn about the genetic basis of the night parrot being nocturnal? We know from anatomical research that they're not quite as good with their night vision as owls are, yet they are nocturnal. So we know a bit from this sort of research in other birds about genes that are involved in night vision and other aspects of behaviour. So how does the night parrot stack up? Has it evolved the same mechanism to be nocturnal, or has it evolved its own little way of doing it? When it comes to conservation, I mean, that's great for the biology and enhancing our knowledge of its evolutionary history and so on, because the genome tells us it's like a blueprint for how the species has managed to survive.
Yeah.
But on present day timescales, we need to stop feral cats eating them. I like to keep my feet on the ground here. Yeah. We need to know where the night parrots are. We need to understand their habitat. We need to know what they sound like. That's all improving. We need to stop feral cats attacking them, which we know happens in Queensland, and it's probably a big part of why they declined. The genome brings another sort of perspective to our conservation. It helps us address genetic diversity. So we can measure genetic diversity from little scraps that we have, such as feathers or bits of birds retrieved after a cat has killed them and so on, a blood sample, for example. And we can get genetic information from that kind of material, and we can estimate genetic diversity and whether it's high or low, or whether the birds are inbred. And we can map that stuff onto the genome, onto the full roadmap, so that we know which part of the genome we're dealing with when we ask a question like, how much genetic diversity does the night parrot have? Is the population in Queensland down low on genetic diversity relative to the birds in Western Australia? Once we start getting into those sorts of questions, we can use the genome to anchor all that stuff. And then we can start thinking about whether we should or shouldn't be translocating individuals from one side of the continent to another, for example. You know, here and now, we need to stop feral cats eating night parrots. But we've got another arrow in our quiver for things we can bring to bear on our understanding of night parrots. And that relates to genetic diversity and what makes them tick.
Right. And so from what I understand about gene sequencing, this technology has been around for quite a long time. But obviously there's been breakthroughs and new technologies that have allowed this sequencing and, as you say, I guess the placing of the names of the towns on the map. On the map of the night parrot. So can you talk us through a little bit about the technology that has been used for this? And
over the last 30, 40 years, the technology's gone from indirect assessments of DNA by studying proteins through to direct sequencing of DNA. And so a few decades ago, we were using a method called Sanger sequencing, named after Mr. Sanger, where you'd sequence a particular defined stretch of DNA. The explosion in genomics methodologies, whereby you can sequence the whole genome and not just a defined stretch of 1,000 or so base pairs at a time, those technologies are rapidly evolving and are linked, I think it's fair to say, with the informatics that you use to assemble the stuff. So you end up sequencing little bits of DNA and you use informatics to put it all together. Those technologies have now progressed to the point where a genome can be done very quickly, pretty cheaply. You may remember the human genome when it was done, 20 years ago? More, massive effort, because they were sequencing bits at a time, whereas now these technologies work differently and make use of informatics.
Is it an extra challenge for you and your team, the fact that there are so few samples of these birds? I mean, they're cryptic and difficult to find in the wild, but also few museums would probably even have samples of night parrots.
There's only about, I think it's just under 30 specimens in the world, and most of them were collected in the 19th century. So we can get DNA from them, but it's still doing it hard. So what happened just in the last couple of years, this poor unfortunate night parrot flew into a fence in Western Australia, and the traditional owners who recovered the bird have given permission for it to be studied. And that bird actually it's been mounted and it went on display at Western Australian Museum, Boola last week. But our collaborators at the Western Australian Museum sent us a little bit of tissue from that bird, and that's what we've done the sequencing from. But yes, you're right. That's one individual from which we've got good genomic data now. But to study the population in Queensland relative to the population in Western Australia, you need samples from them. And that's where currently we have fragmentary DNA from them. And we've also obtained some DNA from an extinct South Australian population in the Gawler Ranges using museum specimens from the 1870s. So that DNA isn't as good, but we'll be able to map it to the genome and know what we're working with.
What in your mind is next for the night parrot research?
Yeah, I mean, we want to mine the genome. We were talking today, I was talking with my colleague Anna Kearns about mining this genome for looking at how much variation is in it And that might give us an index as to levels of diversity in night parrots anyway, and even we might even be able to start thinking about whether there's high levels of inbreeding. So we want to certainly mine the genome, which sounds a bit ruthless, but anyway, we want to mine the genome for interesting biological data related to conservation and the bird's biology. It will be a resource to include in major global initiatives to look at the relationships of the birds of the world, building a more accurate evolutionary tree of birds. And it's really important that that be publicly available, which it will be. But we expect that we'll be the ones who get into it quickest. We're very keen to start exploring the genome for interesting biology.
Well, Leo, thank you so much for joining us on Lost in Science this week. It's so great to hear that through these new technologies and genetic sequencing, we're able to understand so much more about this incredibly rare and iconic bird, even though they maintain, they're more elusive than ever. So thanks again.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
That's all we have time for on another episode of Lost in Science. Lost in Science is recorded on the lands of the Kulin Nations and broadcast across Australia on the Community Radio Network with the kind support of the Community Broadcasting Foundation. If you'd like to get in contact with us, we'd love to hear from you. You can email us at lostinsight@gmail.com. You can find us on X, formerly known as Twitter, or Facebook, or just tune in wherever you find your podcasts or listen to us. Get Lost in Science.
Thanks for listening to a 3CR podcast. 3CR is an independent community radio station based in Melbourne, Australia. We need your financial support to keep going. Go to www.3cr.org.au for more information and to donate online.